Okay, that's a quick update on development and where we're at in discovery. These are development items in Sprint 32. We're ending today on Sprint 32. Negotiated goals, career plan, uh, notes, training programs, document tabs on the entity details page. Um, then adding the first contact mandatory, some more entity details and upgrades to platforms, which is basically a architectural thing, and then some data migration went through this week for entities and entity locations. So that'll be interesting to see some of that data next time you're in UAT. We're continuing discovery on applications, assessments, services, career plan, exits and outcomes, and I've been doing a little bit of discovery on reporting. So that's where we are for our development and discovery timelines. And UAT, Olivia, take away.
So it's just a reminder that we currently have UAT release 4 cycle 1 editing the customer information and the customer profile out. It is due June 3rd. So if you have not already gotten in there or forwarded it on to your frontline staff who are doing that, be sure to get that done, follow up with them, make sure they're getting that done prior to June 3rd. And do we have any questions on UAT? All right. I'll go ahead and keep moving to the working session. I have the first two items up, and then if we time allows, we'll switch over to Al for some reports. We're going to be looking at feedback from the pre-screening discovery work we just talked about last week, and then moving into some application discovery. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right, so I want to kick things off by circling back to the conversation that we had last week regarding the pre-screening and the questions that we're asking throughout the pre-screening process. After our session, we recorded that and we posted that along with a link to this mural board and a link to the pre-screening questions that we walked through. So it had the overview text and mock-ups of the pages, as well as overview text and questions that were asked on each of the pages linked. So I want to open it up right now to see if anybody had any questions after taking a closer look at the Miro and the Excel document that we provided. All right, I'm not seeing anybody come off of mute or type in the chat. I did not get any emails about it, and I did not have any comments put into the Miro board. So if any questions do arise, please make sure you're getting those to us. Our next steps. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I do have one question. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
If you can go back to that screen. When it says you to find the WIOA office in your county, there's like, for instance, in Cook County, there's lots of different WIOA offices. I'm wondering if it would be clearer where it would be like the WIOA office closest to you. I don't know. Like, I'm just
Near
thinking,
you, maybe.
yeah, nearest you or something. I don't know. Near you, I don't know exactly, but because there's so many different ones, and
Yeah.
this will link it based off their zip code, I would assume.
Yep. So they'll be able to put in a zip code or address and then find the one closest to them.
To them, right. And you have it in the other section too. It says use the link below to find the WIOA office in your county. You have it there, and then the very next paragraph. I know it's something just simple, but just,
It does make a lot of difference though, especially for the people of Chicago who are like, I don't want to travel 40 minutes.
right.
That's a good point. And actually, then you've got the other situation where you could have 3 or 4 counties, but maybe the one stop, the WorkNet centers in the neighboring county, but it serves the surrounding counties, and then they might be looking in their county, but and saying, hey, it's not in my county. So yeah, it's kind of a minor thing, but I guess it does make it a little more clear.
Yeah. So if you haven't already, do definitely take the time to look through the text and the questions for the 3 pages. We may be adding a 4th page in. We still have a little bit of work out on that. If we do, we'll bring that 4th page to you and show you how it would fit into the pre-screening process. We know these are the questions we definitely need to ask to determine or screen for potential eligibility for our adult dislocated worker and youth. And then again, we have this mural board that walks through, and we put the numbers in here, the questions and the tracks that they could go down for their dislocated worker. The other one was youth, and then adult. So definitely look through this as well, make sure that all makes sense to you all. Any other questions or comments on this before we jump into the full-blown pre-screening? Or I'm sorry, full-blown application, sorry. Hold on, I want the right mirror board. I don't think that was it. All right, so for this next part of the process, so what we looked at last week was the customer is into the system in IWDS 2.0. We know there's other things happening up front, but we are starting from they have a customer profile created, and then based on the types of services they need, we indicate they need WIOA or both WIOA and self and information only, and so they start the intake process. And to do that, they can determine which of the 2 tracks they're going to go down, either have the customer completed on their own, where the customer's logged in, or they can complete the pre-screening with the career planner, logged in, and the customer would do it with the career planner. And then we follow these 2 tracks. We have our customer logged in, career planner logged in. Essentially, the screens are the same through this pre-screening process. We have purple and orange that represent, if we look back, there's a key up here, action performed by individual, or action performed by career planner or front desk staff. So that's what these are representing. This screen is tied to either of these. And then we are working on the content of the screens that they're going to see when they are potentially recommended or determined not eligible. So we're not looking at those yet. We're focused more on the questions for the pre-screening. And then they will complete this pre-screening. And if the career planner determines that they do want to move forward with the application, again, we're working on the content for these, but the flow is if they are moving forward with the application, then it becomes a track where this has to be done by the career planner. A customer cannot complete the full-blown application on their own. They will be advised that if they are potentially eligible to meet with a career planner to start that application process, the career planner will be notified that they have completed pre-screenings that have been completed that they need to review and move forward with the application with, and be able to see, who those customers are, or who those pre-screenings are for, so they can contact the customers if the customers haven't already contacted them. And then the career planner will review the recommended programs and determine if yes, those are the ones they want to move forward with, or they do have the ability to unselect and select those that they were not recommended for. We do know there is local policy and, the 5% rule and different things in which the system might not have flagged the customer as a potential youth eligible customer, but because of local policy or 5% rule, or the career planner just simply had a conversation with the customer and the customer didn't understand, like the dislocated worker homemaker didn't understand what that was, and just based on basic conversation, it's like, oh, well, you would qualify, under homemaker. We're not going to make the customer and the career planner go all the way back to pre-screening and redo that. The career planner has the ability to say, I want to do the dislocated worker application for this individual and move forward that way. Go ahead, Paul. I see your hand up.
Yeah, so this part is pre-screening. So whether they do it on their own or a staff member, so it doesn't have to be a career planner that's doing this, right? Because some areas have intake staff that process the preliminary, like the pre-screening applications, and
Yes.
then it gets passed down to the career planners.
Yeah, so for pre-screening, we have that it's performed by a career planner or front desk staff, whoever you want to be that person taking that pre-screening information, like logged into it with the customer, can do the pre-screening.
Okay.
But once we get to the application where we're making the decision of, they've completed the pre-screening, now we're going to determine the track that we're moving down for the application. We do have that on as a career planner doing that and not just a front desk staff person. If that's incorrect and we need to be able to have anybody, front desk or career planner, do the determination of which program tracks are going to go down and complete the full-blown application, we can update that.
Well, couldn't that be based off of whatever agency? Because every agency is different. So if they define that that person is, has that authority, then that would be their, those are the rights that are set up for them. I mean,
Yes.
couldn't it be just set up that way as opposed to just making a blanket if you're an advisor and you do that?
Yeah, so they would
So I guess I'm just thinking about the flow. So like in our office, we have the intake staff. When they get to this particular point in the pre-screening process, they're not going to make the determination on if they may possibly meet the requirements for the exceptions to the rule, right? Whether they fall under
Right.
5% low income or 5% needs additional assistance, or things like that, because they're not determining any type of eligibility. They're doing the data collection. So if something needs to be put in on this screen, if they're go through a pre-screen and then get to this screen, and this has to be then done by the career planner in our office once they've been assigned to a career planner.
Yes.
I guess
that's how we have it now. That's why it goes from orange to career planner or front desk to red, which is just career planner. We're no longer saying the front desk should be making this determination. This should go away.
Okay.
So that's how we have it. But I see, Lisa, to your point, that might be how it's done in one LWIA.
Yeah.
And so as we're defining these roles, being able to say like, at other agencies, they might want the quote unquote career planner access, even though they're not a career planner, because they're the ones that are going to be doing pre-screening and the full-blown application, but might not be the actual career planner. So we'll need to consider that as we're branching out the roles that the system's going to have. Crystal, go ahead.
So
go ahead.
just a little kind of what we do with us. We found out years ago that people make mistakes,
Right.
and we don't want mistakes on eligibility. And so even in the system, I mean, I know IWDS has, going all the way to eligibility and documentation, and then you certify that everything is accurate. When we were only in IWDS, we only had our career advisors go all the way up to that point, and then our compliance person reviews everything and then certifies them. So when we moved into Career Connect, that we had to tweak that process a little bit, but the same still holds true. We don't allow our career advisors to certify, simply because people make mistakes on eligibility, and we want to make sure that everything is 100% eligible and all the documentation supported is accurate. And so our compliance person, as part of our process, is the only one that will click the button for a quote unquote certification. So that's just showing, it's just an example as to how some of the different ways that every agency in LWIA might do it. I mean, we do it that way. Another agency in my area might not do it that way, like we do it, So just showing that as an example on how roles can be with other agencies.
Okay. I noted that here too by our certification process. And Crystal, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I have a question about like the interface, I guess, between if this pre-screening process is possible for an individual to just get in there and get to this point, right?
It is, as long as they have been invited. So they have to have an IWDS customer profile, and then a career planner within that customer profile can choose to start the WIOA application intake process with them and send that link to the customer to complete on their own. We are still having conversations about what it would look like to just have a public open one to everyone. There are steps and hurdles we have to overcome to do that.
Right. Well, because that was my question if it's possible for someone to do this on their own, what's the interface look like with who's going to be responsible for this moving forward? Like, is there going to be on a dashboard or something? It gets linked to somebody and it flashes to say, hey, so and so has completed this part, and so you don't have data lag and all that kind of stuff happening. Like,
Yes.
what does that look like?
Yeah, so for this process that we're talking about right here, where the career planner initiates it and sends it to the customer, we will have dashboard rows that like pre-screening sent, not started, pre-screening sent, in progress, pre-screening sent, complete with recommendation, pre-screening sent, complete with like not recommendation or whatever. And those all be linked to like customer accounts that you can get in. And then anytime you come to their profile, you should be able to, like, if outside of the dashboard, if you just come into Amy Hare, I should be able to see where she's at with her pre-screening process and get in and view that. So maybe she started it on her own. You sent it to Amy to do on her own, and she got in and got to the program specific pre-screening and was like, I don't know what this means, and calls you and comes into your office. You can get in, career planner, whoever can click into Amy's, get into her pre-screening, land right here where she left off and help her finish it. So there'll be that access through their profile, but then also a dashboard as a way to track for you guys where people are at, so you can follow up. Like we might even have like a sub row of like customer pre-screening sent and in progress for more than X number of days, because we want to keep that, we don't want them to get like stuck, and so you guys can know like after so many days we follow up with them, or ways to close those pre-screenings to get them out of that dashboard row. Like if 100 days have passed, they just never did it, never came back, let's clear them out so your dashboard's clean.
Okay, because I was just thinking of scenarios where you might have like a frontline staff person, somebody comes in, they want to use the resource room, they decide that, oh, this sounds like it might be for me, they start the process and everything, but then they haven't actually interacted with a career planner person, and then you're like, well, what happened? Where's this person coming from? I mean, that like
Yes.
that situation.
Yeah, so we could still have them in the dashboard. They might not, and like typically we have like a career planner column. They might not have a career planner in that column yet. They might not be assigned to one. But like everybody in that local area could see that and follow up with those people as needed to keep them moving forward.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we move to the actual application pages? See, I have a chat message come through. Yeah, so there's a way to start a narrative with the participant when entering case notes. Will that be an option with IWDS 2.0? Do you mean to like send them an email as
So,
like add the case note and send the email at the same time?
so I'm noticing that you're saying that once the customer completes the pre-screening process and then the career planner receives a notification saying, hey, they can move forward with the process. Is there a way to start like a storyline, just following the customer saying that, yeah, they completed, the pre-screening. Now these are the next steps, prior to all of
Mhm.
this.
Yeah, so you can enter case notes in at any point once the customer record is created to start that case, that narrative. And then
Okay,
as you start the intake process too, you can like tie that to like this intake, this application, this program engagement.
great. Thank you.
Yeah. Omar, you have your hand up?
Yes, I do. I have a quick question about the flow. And I do recognize that there's different ways of that every office or agency does their process, where there's maybe one person taking it from beginning to end, or there's an intake team versus a career planning team or career coaches, what we call them. My question would be up until the intake, which is determining that the customer is eligible to receive the grant, which is signing the application. And then that gives them about 45 days to be enrolled. And that enrollment is done by a career coach or a career planner. What's the handoff? What does the handoff look like between the intake part and the enrollment part?
So once the application is, I can't remember if it is started or completed. We do know that you have X number of days to certify, and then once certified, you have X number of days to have enrolling services. And we will have, again, dashboard rows there too to help bring visibility to that countdown so that like application needs certified within X number of days. And then can highlight those that are approaching that. I can't remember if it's 30 or 45. I know there's some different timeframes there. And the state is discussing those timeframes to determine if that's something they want to change policy on and carry forward into the 2.0, if they'll be the same or if those timeframes will change. But we're going to have dashboard rows there for visibility and making sure that that handoff does happen and those customers don't sit and then have to go back and re-verify application stuff or recertify to continue being engaged in the program.
Because the reason I'm asking is because initially when the intake starts, it starts with the intake team, then it goes to the coach to do a preliminary assessment. That goes back to the intake team to process the application and then hands it back to that original coach that started the conversation with the customer. Now, you also mentioned that there is a time frame for the application. There's a time limit of when the application can be processed. What does that look like? I mean, is there a number of days from the start of the application till you can complete it? Is that what I'm understanding?
There's a number of days from when the application is, I cannot remember if it is started or completed and certified. So you can't like have an application and have it sit 5 months and then certify it. It's either 30 or 45 days And if that time period elapses, then they have to re-review the application before it's certified to make sure that they're certifying correct information.
Will they have to wait the 90 days though? Because I
No,
know that,
No.
okay, because I know that that was a situation for a while.
No, they could come in and be like, oh, we haven't, like the customer comes in and they're like, oh no, we never certified it. Review it right there, then and there with the customer. Like just we'll hold the prior information. It's just re-reviewing. We're not going to make them fill out a new application.
So,
Reviewing everything is correct.
so I'm assuming then it'd just be a new date added in to
Yeah.
kind of show that review is being done now at that point, and then updating any of the information that has changed. They'll have that
Yep.
ability to do that. So there, because sometimes that we've run into situations where it's that, oh, they passed the 45 days, but then they have to have the 90 days, situation that's happening, even with a person that was exited. And then they find themselves needing to be in a re-enrolled type of scenario.
So the 90 days that might come into place if they were certified, had enrolling services, and then were exited. But
Okay.
if they were certified and never got an enrolling service and the 45 days passed, they could re-review application, recertify, and get service right away. It wouldn't be a 90-day hold. It's just when that exit happens.
Even if they had pre-enrollment services with the youth and stuff, even if that was the case, it would be okay.
If they had the pre-enrollment by the
For the
the
youth, right.
non-enrolling ones, yeah. Yep.
Even with that, it would be okay.
Yeah, and Laura, I thought I saw you on at one point. You can correct me if I am wrong, but as long as they don't have enrolling services, they're not going to hit that 90-day hold requirement. So if they're the active the pre-enrolling, they're not on the hook for those because those are not enrolling services. And in 2.0, we're actually going to be getting away from having those because you're doing them in the system. So the system can just know those are being done and set the business logic on its own, not requiring somebody to go in and add a service to say they've done the assessment. We can check and see, are the appropriate assessments done, or has a draft career plan been started?
Yeah, I think currently the policy is 30 days to certify the application from the time they put in the application and signed it. And then the customer signs it. And then it's 45 days from certification to put in an active service. After the 45 days, you can't put in a service. And that application is null and void, pretty much.
Yeah.
You'd have to
And
recertify them. Yeah.
Yeah.
re-review and then recertify, and ours will let you pretty much just start back re-reviewing the application they did and making changes, not making them start a new application or intake process from scratch. We're going to put some time frames around that though, like, if it's been 2 years, maybe it does make sense to start a new application. We're still talking about some of that kind of business logic, but if it's just been like 3 months or something, we can kind of look back at what they've already done and just update as needed. Any other questions before we jump into this application here? I'm going to make a note. I will add in to this flow. I'll add in little notes here to these time frames of when those dates are. I believe you're right. The 30 and 45, that sounds right. I'll double check and then get those here. So as we look back at this, we have those to refer back to. All right, so once they complete the pre-screening and then we determine the tracks they're going to go down, we then move into the full-blown application. I have down here just a couple of mock-ups. As we're tweaking these questions, these will update, but one of the processes that will be a little bit different than the current application is that as we're answering this is different for everybody but always 7th. This is something Career Connect already kind of does. As we're completing the application, whenever we are answering a question that is tied to eligibility and they answer in a way that it puts them on the hook for being eligible through this route, we'll see a section pop up here that says, like, based on your answer you've selected, you have triggered eligibility documentation to be
Hello?
collected. Can you guys hear me?
No, that was me. I was having some audio problem.
Okay. But you guys can hear me now? Good?
Yes, you good.
Okay. So it's going to ask them to complete the required fields, and they are going to then upload eligibility documentation. So like in this situation, if I put that my what's your living situation, and I said that I was homeless, or I think the other option we have in here is like I'm in foster care or something. It would then trigger eligibility documentation for this. And we can upload a new document, or we can add an existing document. So this one is not like a great example, but if I would have done for like my birthday, used my birth certificate, and I'm also using that for other things, instead of like re-uploading birth certificate, I can just add from existing document and pick my birth certificate and select that as document type, and then reuse it again throughout the system. I don't have to like add a new file. The document type is going to be connected directly to the source documentation. So whatever source documentation is allowable, those will all be mapped to the different question and answer options. So if I were to pick homeless or in foster care, this documentation type would be updated to tie to what I've answered. And then they would answer the rest of the questions. Not every question is going to pop open a upload document section. Only those that are tied directly to eligibility will do that. And then there's just a few examples here of some of these screens that we have put together for how this will work. But what we really want to get into is the application question Excel sheet, which I will send out to you guys. We'll post it on the page after. I have a question here in the chat. I think it's directly to me. Give me 1 second. Yeah, so the application is just done by a career planner or local staff member who's been given rights to complete the application. At this time, it is not something that a customer is doing on their own. It's just a local staff member, typically career planner. Could be different though for your areas on who's doing this. So our Excel sheet here, very similar to the pre-screening one that you guys got, a couple more tabs though. We start out with just description text at the top, and then we have our column headers, and then our questions. Remember here that D and E are pretty important because not everybody is going to see all of these questions. There are several questions that are conditional. So here we say, please confirm this information is correct. And then all this information, we know we already have it. It is required for a customer profile to be created. So we're just having them confirm that's correct and move on. We're not going to re-ask them things we've already asked. And then we go into what's their living situation, answer options here. And then you can see here data pull from. So from the pre-screening, we may already know some of this based on how they answered pre-screening, especially for our in-school youth. So we may already have some of these pre-checked based on those answers. We're going to populate everything back to the customer profile. And then we go into the purpose of some of this and Pearl elements it may touch, eligibility. So for here, eligibility, we point out eligibility and priority of service. And then we list out any additional business logic and notes that we have flagged here for this. So as you look here, 2A and 2B, they're two different questions, both asking something around address. But based on their answer options, these are conditional questions. So if they pick 1, 3, 4, or 6, we're going to ask this question. If they pick 2 or 5, we're going to ask this question. And then again, this will help us determine other things on the back end of if it is their permanent residence or if it is not necessarily their permanent residence. But the column D and E, conditional and requirements, do make sure you're keeping an eye on that, because if you weren't, it's like, well, why are you at, like, that could be duplicative. We're trying to get away from that, and that's why we do have a lot of conditional questions in here.
I have a question. I have a question about the
Yeah.
living situation. Are those set in stone as far as the drop down, or are
Nope.
you asking for feedback on that?
Yes, we're asking for feedback on this. So as you guys get this and take a look at this, and even right now as we're talking, if there are things that you think are missing or you would like to see or think need clarification, that is what we want to know here.
Okay.
Our next step will be like moving this forward in the process. So we want to make sure all feedback you guys have gets incorporated.
So we have a lot of youth that are, we call, all intents and purposes, couch surfers, where they leave home and are staying at a friend's house on a couch, or, you know, and they're moving from night to night. I mean, it could, I guess, go to, I need a permanent place to live, but I don't
Actually,
know
what
if you want to, I don't know. I don't know
we
if
had
there's
that broken out at first, like I'm staying with a friends on a couch or temporarily
Yeah.
or whatever. One of the things we're looking at doing is, because that technically fits the definition of homeless,
right.
was adding an info bubble to this one to define. There was a lot of things that could fall under here, and we weren't sure
Yeah.
if spelling them all out or like adding an info bubble to clarify.
I like that info bubble that way,
Okay.
right? It can define exactly what that is. Also with like the, I need a permanent place to live, for, you know, maybe the info bubble is there.
That's what I meant.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Olivia, if you have a drop-down list, you'd only have a single info bubble for the entire list. How can you can't really have a info bubble for each drop-down item, can you?
We can look at how we need this. Maybe this isn't a drop down and it's a checkbox, so we can tie the info bubble directly to this.
Okay, that's where I
Yep.
was wondering how you'd be able to handle that. Otherwise, that info bubble is going to be so long, it'd be an info page.
Yep, and then that'll give us the ability to, if as we get into these, and especially as we get this into UAT, or even when we go live and people are like, we're really struggling with understand this gives us an easy way to come back and maybe add more info bubbles to clarify some of these other items.
The other thing is they might be multiple of those in that list. So we want to get all of them checked, especially for analysis, evaluation, but more importantly, SAM tracking
I'm also
of characteristics.
wondering too, that number 5, parents or a guardian has to sign off on the application. If it says without my parent or guardian's permission, I have a feeling that some parents might not be happy about signing an application where they're saying that, yeah, my kid left house without my permission, even though they're under 18. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there.
That is an youth eligibility
I know,
trigger that we have.
but they still need a signature though, too, right? If they're under 18 to participate.
Yeah, so the guidance that we've received on that is that it can be a parent or guardian, and guardian is utilized pretty loosely.
Sure.
So what we've been given guidance on is that if they're staying with, let's say, their friend's parents' house, their friend and at their house, and the parents are there, so they know the child or the youth, and then they know their family situation and so forth. They themselves, the parents there of his friends, could sign on the application to allow that youth to be in the program. Because
okay.
Yes, that's correct. You could have somebody, long as the person is over the age of 18 and they staying at that person, yes. The rule did not stipulate where they have to be the parents exactly. It just wanted to make sure somebody of legal age, working or whatever, could provide for that person well-being while staying at that person's place.
So then maybe that bubble or an info thing, so that career advisors have a better understanding on that piece. So, so that it's not so black and white, because because a lot of times people define guardian differently.
Yeah.
It can be even a pastor. So if they're going to church or whatnot, and they know the pastor and the pastor knows them well, the pastor can sign for it. So it's somebody in their life that knows their situation and knows them well. That can be considered a quote unquote guardian. The question then I asked before was, well, but they're not parents. So if they get enrolled in the program and the parents find out about it and they're going to be really mad, then what do you do about it? And that seems to not be an issue, because the way that they're kind of defining it was a guardian is somebody that it doesn't have to be a legal guardian per se.
Well, you got to look at it too, what's best for the kid, the person that going in for the service.
Oh, yeah.
And
100%.
the cases are how many times a parent's going to come and criticize what that kid is doing. And sometimes the parents, you got to like, hey, what's best for this child? He want to do this. So I never, or 35 years, heard of a parents came and complained or what you said just now about, oh, my kid doing this service. I have yet to heard it. So
Right.
we don't want to go to that point into legal and all of this stuff, because I've been around probably over almost close to 40 years. I have yet to have a case in either local area that I work with this kind of problem. So just a FYI, I'm just saying that.
And one thing jumping in, one thing to look at too for number 5, if the child has left the parents' home without permission, that means they're a runaway, right? You
Right.
can consider them a runaway. So if they're a runaway and if they're on the street or wherever, and they don't have someone to sign off, then that, should be considered too. So at what point are we trying to really emancipate the person who's under 18? Do we consider them emancipated at that point? And what documentation do we use? So we have to really take a look at that, where we're looking for some guardian's permission if they're not under any guardianship.
And that rule hold true. Now, this is where I had to play devil advocate with everybody here. If the child run away from home, and the parents went to the police department and put in a request that the child had run away because they don't know, now you got the law enforcement involved. Once you bring in the law enforcement involved, any kind of situation going to start to pop up now. Because now the parents put the police is out there, the police going to be checking, the parents going to ask, the school going to ask, they're going to ask friends and stuff. So a lot of the time, if a kid is running away from home and the parents did not know, as you stated, the parents, what you going to do? You're going to put out a police report. You're going to check with everybody. You're going to do this. So again, we're going into a field where you're trimming the line in a sense, where you're trying, you over analyzing it, and remember, you still got the law enforcement you got to deal with. I'm just saying that too.
I would like to ask, is this something you guys run into pretty often? Or is this typically a less used eligibility qualifier? And considerations on, as we're building the training out, do we maybe need to have some examples of situations and how you would go about handling that as part of the training when this eligibility qualifier comes up?
We haven't, but we don't really focus on under 18. We haven't had that kind of situation though for any of the under 18s that we have served in the many years. But I do think though that just defining it and providing more of a training to the advisors is the most important, because we don't want our young people that do fall into number 5 not be served simply because of a misunderstanding on what the guardian means as far as the signature on the page, if that makes sense, on the application, if that makes sense.
Yes, and I agree to the comment in the chat. We want to assist with eliminating roadblocks and not creating them. Kelly,
Right.
if you could add to our training tracking document, like training around who can sign for a youth, I'll put it in the chat so you can copy it out for this kind of living situation. Because yeah, the word legal was key here. It is not in that. It just has to be some kind of guardian, not one that, they have legal status of being their guardian.
Okay,
And
yes,
then
I can add that.
if you could add a couple of the examples of like, a preacher or a parent that the kid might be staying with, of like a friend, and we can work with the state to get some more of those and other locals too.
But I think one
Perfect.
thing that is needing clarification, I think, I forget who it was that was talking about it just now, is, the guardian isn't, I don't think the main issue here. The question in play is if they don't have someone that can sign off on the application for them and they're underage, are they ineligible, or do we have them sign just their name without an adult and then make them eligible? That's the question. So I think that's a policy question that needs to be looked up and addressed to see if that's allowable in cases where they don't have anybody else to sign.
Well, isn't that in the will not grant, but policy that somebody, if you're under the age of 18, it's already written in the policy. And I get what you're saying. What kind of, if that person doesn't have nobody, there can probably be stipulation. I can see it, because again, you got to look at the number. I'm sorry, I'm a number person. Can you tell me how many times that happened in your local area? Matter of fact, all of y'all local area. If the number is less than 3% of the time, or even 2%, there's waivers you could probably put in. Maybe with your board, you could put out board policy that we would allow so much, just like how we got the 5% window, So it's about setting up policy within your local board to do certain things. VCO would approve it. DOL will approve it. It's not to try to add everything in this document that you are doing. Sometimes you just need policies in place in case these things happen. And then when you go back and check how often this happens, I have yet to see it happen, but it's always a good thing to put a policy in place in case you have it. You put a percentage of how many youths could have this role, even if it's just 1%, because we don't want it to make it that we try to break the rule. We want to make sure we trying to give the client something to work, to become something in the future.
I have a note here to check with policy, see if they even have anything on that already. And if they don't, might be something we need to consider and 2.0, and just providing reference to that policy on. So if somebody does run into it, there is policy to address how to handle a situation like that. But again, probably outside of the system, just policy on the appropriate steps to take that, making sure the system can accommodate it.
There you go, Oliver.
All right. So this first page here, I'm really working on collecting contact information. Ward will be mapped on the back end. We'll display it, but we'll auto populate it for LBS 7. We're also probably going to, I don't know if they'll be front facing or back end, as I think what they are now. We'll also be mapping things like the congressional district, and there's a couple of other areas we map on the back end so that we can report and map to in different reports and stuff as well. So we'll be using address there to be able to geocode those kinds of things. Then we are getting a phone number and another phone number. If we happen to already have that because they gave it, it's an optional field on the customer profile, all that'll be pulled in. If we already have any of this information, they don't have to retell us. The next tab is the additional contacts. So if we already have additional contacts, we'll display those. If we don't, we'll ask for additional contacts that they can give us. There'll be a button to add a new contact. Very similar to what we talked about way back when we were setting up the customer profile page. We're essentially replicating a module there and here where they can click add a new contact and then fill out a little modal about that specific contact. So you can see here it's kind of a visual. So they'll click add contact, it'll open up this modal, they'll fill it out, save it, and then it'll add them to the list of additional contacts for
Is
that
there a
individual.
limit as far as how many add contacts you could add?
We don't have a limit set. We do have a comments field, so you can add additional like narrative text about this individual to have when you go to, if you need to contact them for any reason, you have this to, add just free form information. And then just our regular fields. We did update some of these a little bit from 2.0, tried to make them a little more customer centered and map to what we're trying to do. And then if anybody has any questions, definitely unmute or type in the chat as I'm going through these. We have the veteran information. So we really slimmed down veteran information. I guess one of the big things I want you guys to know prior to going in and looking at this yourself, we asked ourselves, what is the purpose of the application? What do we want what is the purpose of our application? The purpose of our application is to determine priority status and eligibility. There are a lot of other questions that the old IWDS application asks that are necessary for the SAM and the Pearl and all that. We are going to get that information, but we're going to get it after application. As we're building our assessments, we'll have an assessment that builds on the application data. So based on what they asked, like if we know they're a veteran, there might be a section in one of our assessments that collects more veteran information about their start date, their end date, did they receive the badge? I can't remember the full wording. Those are not necessary for determining eligibility. They are part of the Pearl. We don't want to necessarily hold everybody up from getting service just to answer a bunch of Pearl questions. We know the SAM is very important. We want to capture that stuff. But again, we want to do that after we get them in and eligible and receiving services. So I want you guys to keep that in mind because as you're looking at this, especially like you see it here on the veteran section, we're missing a lot of the questions you see on the vet pages in IWDS application now. They're not gone for forever. They're just going to move to a different part of the customer experience so that we can get them in and served as we continue to collect this information.
I have a question about that.
Yeah.
Just thinking about sometimes when information isn't necessary at the beginning, it may end up getting missed later on. So will there be safeguards
Yes.
put in place where they're like part of the assessment process, for example, you're required to add this information during that point?
Yeah, we'll have
Otherwise you
system
can't move
checks in
forward.
place. Yes,
Yeah.
to do exactly that, that you have to complete these assessments. You can start building a career plan, getting into all that.
But I'm talking about these questions, like, could you add it there, meaning that they have to put in the rest of this information so that that information is captured, but they can't move forward in, like in whatever it is until that's done. The only reason I'm asking is because sometimes when things are not required on the onset, it's really hard to then go back and make sure that everyone was compliant and that, after the fact. So if there could be some kind of safeguards to ensure that career advisors are going back and putting that information in is very helpful.
Yeah. Let me know if I'm misunderstanding your question. So the way we have it laid out is that, so like if you are a veteran, there's a bunch of pro veteran questions that you need to answer. Or if you mark you're an individual with a disability, there's a bunch of additional pro questions that need answered. So you can complete the application without those pro ones, but then you have to do assessments. And as you are doing those, the system will require those are done before you can receive specific services.
Perfect. Yes, that's kind of what I was getting to,
Perfect.
because I don't want the staff to accidentally not go back because they didn't put it in
Yes.
to begin with.
And we're planning on having like action items and like visibility in the customer profile of what needs done for that customer, and then also dashboards at a higher level to see like all like sets of customers that need actions done. So managers can manage it from the high level, but then as I'm working directly with the customer, I have visibility of what I still need to do to essentially have that step complete.
All right, that's
Al-
perfect. Thank you.
Also, let me just chime in on that. I like that idea. I think it's something that is needed. Now, sometimes people does need to go ahead of the application, do what they got to do. The key part is before that application can be certified, and when say that person decide, oh, they forgot about it, right? But they try to go make the application certified now as eligible, that you will not be allowed to make that application certified because it's going to show you all the errors that you had to go back and fix. So for you to make that application certified and eligible for WIOLA service, trade service, or whatever service you're doing, you got to go back and fix it. Would that be something y'all looking to do at the end where it shows you a list of stuff that you have to correct before this application becomes certified? Let me
Yeah,
know
so
your
this is
thoughts.
kind of outside of the additional items. So you could certify it without all the other stuff or move into the assessments. But for the questions we are asking in the application that are necessary for determining priority status and eligibility, you do have to have all of those completed with your documentation and the source doc type in order to certify. You can move forward, but we're going to flag before you can certify that you have nothing answered here, so you cannot certify. One of the things that the system will be allowing for is self-attestation. I know that is source documentation already, but we want to allow customers. So say I didn't bring my birth certificate, you can still move forward with the application and certify. Maybe I lost my birth certificate and I need help ordering a new one and all that fun stuff. You can still certify the customer with self-attestation there while you work with them to obtain their birth certificate, or maybe they had a house fire and they lost like all of their documentation. So you have a lot of documentation to get. So you have a lot of self attestations. You can still certify them and work with them while they're getting that, and then come back in and update that documentation as you get it. We'll have some flags on eligibility determination for how many are using self-attestation. We'll also have dashboard rows that help us track that, because we don't want people just to say, I'm not going to bother asking you to get your birth certificate. We're just going to self-attest to everything. That's not the intent of this. So we're going to have dashboard rows and reports to have visibility of that and track that across local areas and career planners to make sure we're using it for its intended purpose. But we do want to remove barriers to say, oh, well, we can't certify you because you had a fire and you don't have anything. We still want to be able to certify them and work with them to get the appropriate documentation that's needed, whether it's a house fire or they just left it at home. We don't want to have to make them make multiple trips to come go get it and come back and finish things. So we do really want to work on streamlining that process while also keeping visibility of how we're using it to make sure it's being used correctly.
So I have a question about that. I really like that idea, but just playing devil's advocate for a second. Let's say thinking of a youth, for example, house fire, lost their documents, or maybe don't have the documents, and there's been times where we've had to use other funding to secure it from, like, let's say California, because they were born in California and and needed to get their birth certificate. But let's say we use the affidavit and they are working on trying to get it, but 2 weeks later, they decide that they're going to fall off the face of the earth. They're enrolled in the program. They've fallen off the face. We didn't get that birth certificate. Will this now be a finding on us?
It shouldn't be, Mark, please correct me if I'm wrong. It shouldn't be, we're using self-attestation where the source documentation allows for self-attestation.
Yeah,
So,
that's correct. There are now very few instances where self-attestation can't be used. You just have to make sure you've at least asked for documentation. And so, you don't just default to self-attestation all the time just because it's easier. So,
Well,
and the
right.
purpose is to not make it cumbersome or delay an individual's ability to enroll in the program, receive a service, et cetera. So, you ask for it, and if they don't have it, you say, hey, it'd be nice if you bring it in next time we meet. Let's go ahead and move on and go ahead and check self-attestation. You can always upload the document later.
Right. I'm just more concerned about, in the case note, it says, customer is going to be providing blah, blah, blah. And then customer doesn't, because customer decides for one way, shape, or form that they're not continuing on, because, that happens. That happens a lot where
Well,
customers, and I just don't want that to be a finding later, because.
well, I think it's the text that you use. I think in that situation, I would say customers indicated they will bring in the document at this time. We're accepting self-attestation and move on. Because if you say they're going to bring it in and you're waiting for that to do the next step, you're unduly
Well,
delaying
of course,
them.
we wouldn't we wouldn't
yeah.
hold it up,
Yeah.
but I'm just saying later on. I'm always thinking about
Yeah, I don't think that
monitoring.
should be, I don't think that should be an issue because again, the understanding is self-attestation can be used in lieu of them having the document with them.
Okay.
yeah, and we did, just so everybody knows, we put together, I don't know, a handful or more scenarios of situations in which we use self-attestation and worked to get real documentation and different ways that could happen, or what might happen, and we walked through all of those to see, like, where could we maybe get caught up, what issues might we have. And those all, when we did that with the state team, with we had the representation from monitoring on there, policy, performance, all that fun stuff. And we didn't find any situations in which we would run into issues unless somebody was just like, I'm not asking for documentation. I'm having all of my customers just do self-attestation because it's easiest for me. Um, that was really the only issue we were running into, is when it was being misused. So
Okay. Thank you.
yeah, and as you guys are again, as you guys are looking at that, we did that. We went through our scenarios, but if as you're looking at this and you walk through your own scenarios with like an example customer, kind of walking through these questions and doing this stuff, if you do run into a situation you're like, well, I don't, that could be confusing or cause an issue, definitely provide that to us, so we can make sure that we do account for it and that possibly happening. Not saying we always catch every single thing or get it right, the first time through. So definitely challenge what you're seeing and what you're doing to make sure it's going to work. The next section is our private information section. I think we have 7 pages total. I'm gonna, again, we'll give this to you guys to look at it in more detail. I just want to kind of walk through some things with you. Overview text, please confirm information we collected at profile. And then This section says the following information was provided by the customer during pre-screening. Please upload necessary documentation. So during the pre-screening, this was this general eligibility where we were getting their date of birth, U.S. citizen, selective service. These are this is informational text. So based on what the customer enters on the pre-screening for selective service, we'll know what text to display. And then we have our selective service questions. They've already answered these for the most part if they met the criteria. So if I said yes, US citizen, this obviously wouldn't display. If I am a female, none of this would display. If I'm a male under 17, none of it would display, or under 18, none of it would display. So the purpose of this is we need to collect that documentation. So they've answered it already, but now we need to get the documentation. The documentation collection is done only on the application. We're not doing any of that at the pre-screen. So this is our space to kind of do that for all the general eligibility before we go into some other private information such as social security number and justice impacted English language learner. So again, make sure you're paying attention to column D and E. There are conditional questions. So we're not asking all of these to everybody, just the people who answer the question in a specific way. I will note Social Security number is, as it stands, not a required thing to collect. So we do have text up here. We are required to print out information to give to the customer about the Social Security number and how we're going to keep it safe and all that. So that's what this text here is, and you can print a copy out. It's kind of our thought that locals would just have these, like our career planners would have these at their desk to hand. You wouldn't necessarily print and walk to the printer every time, but we want the system to be able to support the printing of the information that is required by policy, and then requiring that they don't have a social security number they want to share. So that is something that we have talked about. We know the implications of that, but we are required by policy to not require that, or have a way the system does not require that. We know it'll impact wage matches, syncing to accounts to minimize duplicate records. We are aware of that.
Do you want to add at the top there, when you're talking about for the Social Security number, the benefits? It only just talks about how it helps us to support, reporting requirements for federal programs. But I mean, really, a lot of times when we talk with our customers, we talk about the benefits of having that information. It provides, proof that this work is helping others, and therefore it continues the funding. That's kind of how we say, we want to prove that everything that we've received helps, and it that way it then can continue to prove that this funding is needed, and therefore it continues to help more people. I don't know, just maybe considering some kind of benefit piece to it, so it's not just so federal workforce program kind of jargon, if that makes sense, because maybe it tugs at the heartstrings for customers a little bit if we do it that way.
I think that's a good idea. I can take that back with our state team and get it written in our language that kind of matches here. But I think that's a good thought there, especially saying, like the fund help continue this kind of resource for other people, especially if it's helping them.
Especially when we're supposed to be doing more customer centric and human centric stuff. We don't want to just sound like we're a government program and that's it.
Right. Our next tab here is our education tab. So I have a question for you guys here on this one. We don't have very many education questions. We do have to ask, what is the most recent school training you finished so far for everybody. But here we are wondering if you think these questions should just be for youth or if adult and dislocated workers should see these on the application too. If, for youth, when they're doing pre-screening, we're going to know this one so we can auto-populate it. Are you currently going to school? Or are you going to school right now? And then the 1A is if they say yes, then we ask what kind of school or training are you in right now? Would you want these questions also asked to adults? And if so, I need the why you would want them asked for adults.
The
If we
only reason is for those that are participating in, the LPN program, but we get that information from them anyways. I don't think it's necessary. We do get a lot of people that are coming through LPN programs that want help paying for it. And us knowing that ahead of time, then we can see where they are in their training. But that's only for those individuals. So I don't really think it's necessary.
Okay, we are planning for like adults and dislocated workers. Like this could be something we ask on the assessment piece. Like even make it so like if they're doing training, then we ask it in some kind of like training assessment, or just because we don't ask it on the application doesn't mean like we can't ask it somewhere else. And again, we're really trying to keep this application focused to priority of service and eligibility to streamline customers' entry into the program. So I just wanted to add that too, that just because you say, no, I don't want it on the application doesn't mean we can't ask it in an assessment or later place in their experience.
I'm sorry to cut in. Hi, I'm Shanika. I'm a youth coach, but I do know our adult career coaches ask that question because we use that for suitability. So that's very important for suitability. So if adult coach is already in school and they're looking to come to IT training, we try to base that off of suitability. Are they going to be able to juggle both if it's not an LPN program? So I think that's a question that's needed.
Do you think it's needed though on the application, or if they determine they're going in training, then we have a training assessment that helps them determine the best training and ask it there for?
So I think the application, because that's going to determine if the customer is even going to enroll. Because if the customer is only seeking training, coming to us for only training, and they're already in school and they don't base it as a suitability issue, I think that can be situated at the very beginning.
But it's not an eligibility thing though.
No, it's not an eligibility, it's a suitability thing.
Right. So if it's not an eligibility thing, I don't know if it should be an application. I think it should be in the suitability piece.
We use that for pre-screening for planning, budget planning. We have a fair number of adults and dislocated workers who come to us to pick up a second semester of whatever kind of training they're doing or whatever that is. If we can pick them up and help them out and spend less money and put more people in, then we want to do that.
We do that same thing as Crystal does. So I think it might be better suited to be located in the pre-screening process, so that it's upfront. We know what the training is that they're in school, and then also what training that they're going for. So that question that you had there, it says training or school or training. That should be an and. What school are they attending and training that they're going for? Because that's going to make a difference too, because the different LWIAs may need to get that training institution on their contracts, right? Under their locally approved, list and so forth, in order to send them to training. If their local area hasn't gotten that on their approved list yet.
Yeah, I could see that on the pre-screening. On the application side, I don't see why we would need it on that part. The pre-screening would be good because at least you got a determination of what this client wants coming in.
Are we talking about the same? The pre-screening though is what we talked about last week to determine just basic eligibility for program
Right, and that's part of the basic eligibility. If this person coming in to do training, okay, well, let us know what you're already doing so we could at least plan for it. But to put it on the application side, we already got 1,001 stuff on the application. How much more stuff we want to continue adding to the application? And then who is pulling out those reports to justify planning the expense and stuff to say, okay, we have so many come in. To me, we don't want to overburden the application part of it, but the pre-screening, get your pre-screening stuff added what you need. That
Talk
one
to me a little bit
dictate.
more about that. I'm not following you guys on putting it on the
I think there's some pieces of what they're like basically saying with respect to individuals not wasting their time. They come to us if they're coming through the program and then they find out way later that something that this might not be suitable for them. They might get irritated. And so by finding out some of those pieces up front, that might not yield them coming into the program might be something that should be added to a pre-screen. If I'm
Yeah, that's something. That's right, Lisa. Something. Let
just a
them know
couple of
ahead
the
of time.
things.
Yeah, it's just let them know what they're getting into. To put it at the application, to me, that's overkill. Now that you
And
got
it's
them
not part of
in,
eligibility. And then if
yeah.
you wait, right.
So at pre-screening, help
An
me
example would
understand
be
how it would
An example would
be a
be someone
no.
that's going to their master's degree program or a master's or a bachelor's degree, and they're like, "Ooh, I found out that WIOA can pay for occupational training. I'm going to come over here. Can you help me pay for my bachelor's degree?" And that's not something that we do. And
Okay, so they're
but
already in school and they learn about WIOA, so they
right.
apply to have WIOA pay for the rest of their school, and it's not like an approved program. So you're like, no, and then like, well, what was the purpose of this?
Right. And really, this is short-term occupational training, skills training types of programs, right? And they're going for whatever it is, and it's just not appropriate. That's a kind of a cut and dry example, but there's other things that people come through to us and then they find out. But I don't know. I don't know if you can actually put all of it in there though, because there's so many different variations.
Yeah. We are wanting to have a WIOA like orientation video and pamphlet about what is WIOA and how can it help you. And would this be one of the things that maybe is there as an overview for them? Or do you think
possibly, because like for example, we're dealing with a customer right now that's very angry because he wants to attend CDL training and he has 13 pages on his DMV record with multiple DUIs and all sorts of stuff, right? The CDL training is not appropriate for him. Sure, he can get the credential, but he ain't going to get a job because he's uninsurable, he's mad because he's like, this is what his focus is, and he's wasted his time essentially. It's kind of how he's looking at it. Now we're viewing it a different way. We want to help him and guide him down the path to, to an appropriate program that would be more suitable, for him.
Yeah.
Based on his interest, but he's mad, right? So that I'm just using that one kind of as an example. We don't want to make customers wait 1,000 years to find out about some of these things ahead of time. So if you're setting up that kind of video or something, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah. My wheels are spinning now because I think that example you gave is really good, and then kind of understanding, this are good scenarios. And how can we let the customer know or like explore that early to decide if this is the right path for them without overburdening like a pre-screening or application process with 1,000 questions for these potential tracks.
I think we can't undervalue the suitability versus eligibility question, because it has direct impact on performance measures at the back end.
100%.
So, if you're putting in 100 people and you're just putting them in there to fill numbers or something, your performance is going to be terrible, because when you come out at the other end, you haven't looked at how many barriers does that person really have? Is it realistic for them to go to school? Have they chosen something that's actually going to get them employed? And yeah, sure, you're going to address some of that in the assessment process, but it would be so much easier to pre-screen it, at the beginning. And
But it is a fine line though, because to me, career advisors, they're human, right? And if they have someone that's really, really difficult, it's like for us, we're like, challenge accepted. We want to help, we don't want any cherry picking type of scenario. So it is a fine line.
Mhm.
We don't want people to just be knocked out because they have a whole bunch of things that they need to get remediated. But sometimes advisors might not understand it that way,
exactly.
So there is that fine line. And how do we make it so that the system allows for this? You know what I mean?
And one of the things we were wanting to do is that a more thorough training assessment or like suitability training suitability review. So before you start putting them in training and they're on the hook for some of those extra performance measures, you are determining, are they a good fit for whichever path and what needs to be overcome. So we're still getting them in and served and working to address, but also looking at assessing prior to getting on the hook for the credential and the MSG. Some of those, I know you're still on the hook for some of the other performance metrics. I'll definitely bring this up with our state team as we're talking through this, about the suitability versus eligibility, and see their thoughts on that. Do you guys have any like maybe we don't put them in the application, but before they could receive specific services, you would like to see specific kind of suitability happening? Anything, what would you like to see here to help ensure we're still getting customers in and served and not trying to, like, I think we said, cherry pick customers, but we are being mindful and aware of what they're going to need in order to get served and be successful.
And this
Let
is
me ask a
Michael.
question. Oh, go ahead.
Thanks, Robert. I think I'm the only one on from state, so I'm not wanting to speak for everyone. I mean, I think this is good to hear this and see some examples of how you handle it. I think we have to be cautious of not jumping ahead in what that suitability is. So like the example you gave, Lisa, about all the way towards training for an occupation. Well, there are other things we can do to assist an individual that may not require training.
Of course.
And so, we
Right.
want to make sure, and that goes back to the whole, cherry picking, creaming, whatever you want to call it, is that we aren't asking questions that kind of push them aside to say, well, you're not really right for us, when all we were thinking about is you're not right for training. So, I think this has always been a concern and interesting place for me because I'm not out there in the local area. I've been around now over 20 years, and we hear these kind of things, and I don't, not having
That's
seen
always,
it play out.
yeah, that's
It's
always my soapbox too, Mark.
yeah,
Like,
yeah. So I think this is like a good example of a discussion that would help me, at least, if not many of us here at OET, understand what you all have to go through, your career planners have to go through, and how we can help identify whether it's, the language you use, the questions you ask, how you do it, where you don't jump too far ahead and go, well, no, we don't want to put them in our program because we know they're not going to succeed at what they want. But that's a clear message too, to say, well, if all you're here for is get a CDL and you're not suitable for it, I'm not sure what I can do for you.
but it goes even a little bit further. It starts at the very beginning, even before they even come into our office. It's the marketing and it's the understanding of what WIOA actually is. It is time and time again one of my soapboxes that I stand on that is so irritating, that the schools push individuals into WIOA. And we're always talking about it being an employment program, not a training program. And I think that we have to change that mindset and have that be kind of our mantra, because at the end of the day, there's so much more we can do and stop just being a voucher mill, right? And so that's why we're having those discussions with that individual. He might have had this different idea. I'm not saying he wasn't suitable. I'm just saying he's not suitable for that training.
Right. Right.
But he's definitely suitable for WIOA. And that's why we're having those discussions with him. And I think that too goes to, to point to the advisors themselves. And, you have to have, they're human, right? And if an individual is not following through or what have you, they have other individuals that they're in the pipeline. But we as management have to really kind of identify, okay, where are all the people in the pipeline? How are they suitable? And kind of going through like essentially a staffing on these individuals so that people aren't like lost in, through the cracks, so to speak. Simply because of a phone call that wasn't made or a thought of training that wasn't appropriate.
Right. And to follow that through too, there's some pre-screening stuff that like if you talk to somebody, they could come in with food stamps and they could be perfectly eligible, but if they've got some like major issue that it has to be handled before they can even entertain going into WIOA at all. You don't want to turn them off on the program by going, oh yeah, we can't really help you. I mean, you want that, but then at the same time, pre-screening as far as like the 1A, 1D, asking them if they're in school, those are people also that have got some skin in the game already. So that knowing that ahead of time also helps you like, okay, now they're bringing all their eligibility stuff in. That's fantastic because look, they are so motivated. They want to go. And when they present with barriers, they're going to be willing to address them too. And so the have to be invested as well.
That is the page we're thinking about adding to the pre-screening, Crystal, kind of what you just described of like, how can we help you and what's preventing you from getting there?
Yeah.
And trying to understand so we're not just saying tell us everything that's wrong with you, but first, like, what are you wanting to do? And then what's stopping you? And it could be I'm homeless. It could, we want to maybe bake in the basic skill screening tool questions, just like rewrite those to be things that like could be barriers from like, I have a hard time understanding forms or whatever that might be. So that's actually a page we're looking at that might kind of help do a little bit of that like bring some of that stuff to light without like making it like, oh, sorry, no. I do quickly want to just talk about pages 6 and 7 because we're at time and I want you guys to have context going into them. 6 is household employment. This is our dislocated worker screen. So you'll see all these are for dislocated workers. So if that's the track they're going down, these are the questions they're going to see to determine dislocated worker eligibility and collect the dislocation job. A lot of this, they're going to be able to search EBS and the Dun & Bradstreet database. It'll connect that and pull as much of that in as we can and populate things from the pre-screening when we can. So that is 6. 7 is our family and household. This is where we're looking at things like if they're a youth, if they were pregnant and parenting, and then for a youth and adult, we're collecting income information to determine priority of service and low income youth eligibility qualifiers. And then if they don't meet, we'll have the family income calculator there for them to do if needed. If they're already low income, they don't need to do that. So quickly wanted to flag those. Rory, you had your hand up, so if you have a question, I definitely want to take that before we kind of close out for the day. You put it down, so we might have already answered, but I wanted to circle back to that. All right. I'm not seeing you come off mute, so I'm going to assume we've already answered your question. Our steps here today is I'm going to work with Kelly to get this posted on our transition page as a resource, and she'll send out an email with the recording to this session and a link to a copy of this for you guys to have to take a closer look at. I'm also going to send out, we have, it came out of it. I have a Miro that looks at the priority of service flowchart and the dislocated worker flowchart and the youth eligibility flowchart. So these are at an extra level above the pre-screening. These get into the actual full-blown eligibility. So we'll put a copy of that out for you guys to look at as well as you're going through the application questions. Any comments, questions, feedback you guys have, please send that to Kelly and I. If there's questions or if you have concerns or comments about questions or things you think should be reworded, added, removed, we want to know all of that by next week. When we meet again next week, I will be taking some time to go over comments and feedback you guys have from this after you've had the opportunity to look at it. And I think Taylor might also have something to go over with you guys. But we will definitely have a full week next week when we meet. With that, any closing questions or comments? All right, well, thank you guys so much for your time today and for your thoughts and feedback and conversation as we are going through this. I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You have a great day too. And to everyone.
Yep. Thank